So in this time of online education, I went to some of my friends on Twitter and some other social media outlets, and I asked the question, what do you wish you had learned while you were in high school, before you went off to college or the workforce or the military, whatever it was that you were going to do? And I received a heck of a lot of different answers, and it was kind of interesting to see. One of them just happened to strike me, and it was they wish they'd understood Title IX. And I thought about it, and I'm like, well, I know what I know about Title IX, but what do other people know about Title IX? So I figured, why not talk about that? First off, one of the things you should know is that Title IX is an addition to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Basically, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination based on things like race, religion, sex, national origin, stuff like that. And it applied itself in voting, employment, and housing. All right. Well, eventually in 1967, federal contracts are going to be involved. So if you got a federal contract, the federal government then could say, hey, you have to make sure that you're not discriminating based on the following, the list that I just previously mentioned. Okay, that's really cool. But it was in 1972 that Richard Nixon signed the Title IX amendment, basically. And what it did is it applied to schools. And the idea was that it was going to add in the fact that a school could not discriminate based on gender. Now, let me explain. What's really cool about this is it's only 37 words, and I'm going to attempt to read it. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So basically what it's saying is you can't be discriminated based on sex if your school program is receiving federal aid. Okay, there we go. Well, the way that it has applied to schools most frequently, and the way that I always thought about it, and probably most of us think of it, is Title IX was the way that we tried to make sports more equitable. Now, there's a reason for that. Part of it is because there was not a lot of emphasis placed on sports for women. For instance, in 1972, only 15% of all college athletes were female, and only 7% of high school athletes were female. So that's not a lot. So here's the deal. In order to create this, a school could use three different techniques. One was proportionality, then there was progress, and then there was satisfied interests. Basically, for proportionality, what you had to do is if 20% of the boys participated in a sport, you had to find 20% of the girls to participate in a sport. That can be kind of hard to do. And so schools could opt for whichever one of these they wanted to try. Progress was another one. You had to prove that you were progressing toward trying to find equity. For instance, if you had a basketball team that was a guys and a basketball team that was girls, great, but how did you deal with just a boys-only football team? You created something else for girls, and that could promote progress, and then you could get by with that. Another thing is satisfied interests. And what satisfied interest means is you take a look at the things that girls are most interested in the area. For instance, if women really like running, then you're going to have a track and field program, or you're going to have a cross-country program, or something like that. And so you can prove that you're following Title IX's guidelines if you're looking to create something that helps the women in your particular area. And so schools had leeway to choose which method that they wanted to use. Now, the benefits that this country gained from Title IX dealing just with sports, by 2015, we had the 26th consecutive growth in women's high school sports. By 3.2 million women were involved in sports. So that means for all those years, there was a continual growth of women participating in athletics. That's wonderful. Next, I know in the early 2000s we went over 40% of women involved in collegiate athletics, which is really a big deal. I can't remember exactly the percentage. Another important deal is scholarships. Women now have the ability to gain scholarships via athletics to go on to college, and that is going to open up college to many, many more women, and that is wonderful. Another thing that I'm really big on is athletics builds confidence, character, overall health, and that's a real big deal for everyone, not just women. But women didn't have access to it before, and they do now, and so that's a big deal. So, how does this apply to you if you are not an athlete? Notice I didn't say if you weren't a female, because the issue with this gender discrimination deals with both genders. It doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. First off, what happened is in 1988, the Civil Rights Restoration Act occurred, and basically what they said is this idea, the idea that you cannot discriminate on a person based on gender, applies in anywhere where there's any possible federal aid. And so it could be a person receiving a federal scholarship to a school could count, and not to mention just any regular school. And so this is going to broaden the scope. Also, a new idea is going to occur, and you're going to start to have protections, and this is super important, protections against sexual harassment. Sexual harassment under Title IX is considered sex discrimination, and that is a prohibited act, and you are protected from sexual discrimination, any kind of sexual discrimination, whether you're a male or a female, particularly in schools and particularly in anywhere where federal funding is involved. Later, the Obama administration actually changed some of the wording around, and in order for a person to, like, let's say, accuse a school of some kind of sexual harassment or anything like that, it used to be kind of tough to do. It was kind of a beyond the shadow of a doubt type of a thing. And so it was really tough to actually bring charges against a university or something like that. And the Obama administration changed that terminology to a preponderance of evidence, which is a legal term that means more than the other, basically. So if there's more evidence on this side than there is on this side, then you can win the case. And so what happens is it's going to lead to a substantially larger number of lawsuits that are out there to protect people, not just women, but to protect all sorts of people who felt that they had been discriminated against, sexually harassed, or something like that, or basically mistreated based on their gender. And so that was a big deal. Later, the Obama administration also added transgender individuals to this. For instance, if a transgender individual wanted to take a class that was a specific gender, like it was a men's only class or a women's only class, they could take that class. If they wanted to change their own personal records, for instance, if you're over 18 and you're in college, you can change your college records to state that you are a male or a female, according to this. All right. In 2017, much more recently, the Board of Education decided they were going to change that wording in order to bring suit against a university or an employer or something like that. You had to have what was now called clear and convincing evidence, which is a higher bar, just so you know. And what that did is it made it harder for individuals to file suit against an employer or a school or any other organization. Just made it a little bit more difficult. All right. So also, and this is also something I think kind of interesting, the Board of Education, the Secretary of Education, decided to eliminate all guidance when it came to gender identity. Previously, gender identity was more dealt with the way the individual viewed themselves. It changed. Now it is more ambiguous. We're just not sure because the current school board has not really clarified that. So we're really not sure. But I will tell you a couple of things that are super important to know about Title IX. It's not just for sports. It's not just for women. It is a civil right. You have a right to not be discriminated against based on your gender. Another very important part of this is that schools may not retaliate against a person who brings forward an allegation. They cannot retaliate, and they must actively try to protect that individual. Next, schools have to be proactive, meaning that any educational institution that receives federal money has to not only have an established procedure for dealing with complaints and things like that, but also a way to protect individuals, and they have to have a coordinator in charge. Now, in most high schools, a counselor or someone like that will take over this role. But it's really important to know, above all of this, that Title IX protects individuals against being discriminated based on their gender. And so if you feel like you've been discriminated based on your gender, if you think that something isn't fair, or if you think you're being treated differently and it's harming you, what you need to do is, if you're in a school, you need to tell someone about it. If you are in a university, also tell someone about it. If you're in the workplace, you need to tell someone about it. And I will try to give you a couple of links at the end that might make it a little bit more helpful for you. But Title IX clarifies some of our civil rights. Thank you for listening.